Hi everyone, this is Karen.
Hello everybody, I'm Shane.
Today we're looking at part 1 of the cold, hard facts about frozen food. And the vocabulary words are frozen.
Frozen.
During the winter, I love skating on the frozen lake.
Billion.
Billion.
The world's richest man is worth over $170 billion.
Wow.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. Industry.
Industry.
Following World War II, the steel industry was at its height.
Impress.
Impress.
Lena impressed her teachers with how well she could play the piano.
Switch.
Switch.
My mom mentioned that she switched to a new brand of dish soap.
What? Really?
Yeah. This is
so exciting.
This is so cool. But we're not talking about dish soap today. We are actually talking about frozen food.
I grew up eating frozen TV dinners.
Me too.
Did you?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, like my parents both worked,
Yeah.
and my mom didn't have a lot of time to cook. My dad didn't have time to cook. So in our freezer, we had a lot of TV dinners. And in
right.
America, I don't know, in Canada, are there a lot of frozen TV dinner options?
Oh, there's a lot of, frozen TV dinner options.
You go into the grocery store in America, there is a huge selection of all kinds of frozen dinners. It's quite convenient.
And I think a lot of families, they have one of those huge freezers in their basement. Well, I had one in my basement. So my dad would buy a lot of these, TV dinners, frozen food TV dinners.
So it's interesting to think there was a time when people didn't have frozen food.
And I think it's just so convenient.
It's so convenient. Nothing can go bad. Just put it in the freezer. I love to
right.
freeze everything.
Me too.
Yeah, because it lasts forever.
Exactly.
All
Okay,
right.
let's learn more about frozen food.
The cold, hard facts about frozen food. When you're in a rush to make dinner, there's nothing more convenient than a frozen meal. Today, frozen food is a $240 billion global industry. But have you ever wondered how it all began?
Today's lesson is called The Cold, Hard Facts about frozen food. Part 1. Hello everyone, my name is Jeff.
And I'm Mike. So the cold, hard facts, we're giving you all the basic, true, most important information you need to know about frozen food. That's right, the food that you get at the supermarket.
That's cold
from
and hard.
That freezer, that's really, really cold. It's below zero. It's frozen. And of course, food like that is cold and hard because it's frozen. And if something is frozen, this adjective just means the temperature is below 0 degrees. It's in an ice-like state. Ice is frozen water, right? It's water that's become a solid because it's gotten very cold, in the same way that your corn or your peas or your vegetables or frozen fish will be very cold and hard because it's frozen. Let's look at the adjective frozen and its example sentence. During the winter, I love skating on the frozen lake. The water of the lake freezes, that would be the verb, and then it becomes frozen water or ice.
It's frozen solid, so it's
Super
nice and hard. You won't fall through and freeze to death or anything like that. Anyways, though, frozen food. It's awesome. It's great. I'm a big fan. Yes, when you're in a rush, let's say, to make dinner, there's nothing more convenient than a frozen meal. This is true. You go ahead and you pop it into the microwave and you're good to go. And by the way, there's more to frozen food than just the delicious food. It's also kind of a big deal money-wise. It's big business.
Absolutely, yeah. For more than 100 years now, frozen food's a big deal. And as people get busier, they turn to frozen food much more frequently because it's convenient and you don't have to worry about it being fresh. It says today's frozen food is a, get this, $240 billion global industry. That's a lot of money. But have you ever wondered how it all began? So now it's a big business. Lots of big companies make lots of big money off frozen food because so many people buy it. But how did it all start? We'll be talking about that in the rest of today's article.
Before we move on, let's go ahead and talk about the word billion. It's a noun. 1 billion is 1, the number 1, followed by 9 zeros. It's 1,000 million. It's a whole lot of money. If you've got $1 billion, let's say, you've got a whole lot of money. And here we're talking about an industry that's valued at $240 billion. That's pretty big. For example, the world's richest man is worth over $170 billion. He probably doesn't need all of that money. That's a huge amount of money.
Yeah, you could spend $1 million a day for the rest of your life and still have lots left over, probably. All right, anyways, so let's look at this other word, industry. Industry is a word we use to talk about different types of businesses. Industry is usually the kind of business where we make things. So we think of factories and warehouses. The steel industry makes thousands of tons of steel that's used in all sorts of ways. The car industry, the airplane industry, the computer industry. So these are things where they produce things in factories or workshops or places like that and then ship it out to stores where we buy it. For example, following World War II, the steel industry was at its height. They were producing lots of steel for war machines, and then of course all that steel soon became cars. So after World War II, car companies took up a lot of what the steel industry was making. Let's take a break and we'll be back with more about the frozen food industry.
Hello， 大家好，我是 Hanny。这2天的课程是关于冷冻食品，那么标题是 The Cold Hard Facts About Frozen Food。好，那么单字 frozen 就是形容结冰的，或是冷冻的，也可以形容冻僵的。那么顺便补充它的相关词性 ，freeze 是动词，它可以表达使结冰、使冻结。那么三态是 freeze、froze、frozen。好，那么在 freeze 后面加上 ing 变 freezing， 就是形容非常冷的或是结冰的。好，那么至于在 freeze 后面加上 r 变 freezer， 则是指冷冻库、冷冻柜。好，那么再来看到标题里面的 cold hard facts， 什么叫做冷冷硬硬的事实呢？它就是指确定的铁证如山的事实。那么我们知道冷冻食品又冷又硬，所以这个用语正好就是呼应课程主题，一语双关。好，大家都应该知道冷冻食品很方便嘛，加热完就可以吃了。那么现今冷冻食品它是一个产值2400亿美元的全球产业哦。那这边用到2个单字 billion 是指10亿 industry 它是指产业、行业或者是工业。Mike 老师在解释单字时用到 warehouse， 它是指仓库或者仓储。那这个字是拼作 warehouse warehouse。这趴课文中。
The cold hard facts about frozen food. The history of frozen food dates back to as early as 1000 BC, when the Chinese stored food in ice cellars. However, frozen food didn't become popular until much later. The modern frozen food industry began with an American man named Clarence Birdseye. During a trip to Canada, Birdseye went ice fishing with Inuit people and noticed that their fish froze immediately in the cold air. Impressed by how fresh the fish tasted, he brought the idea back to the United States.
Everyone, the history of frozen food goes all the way back to ancient China. I'm not joking around here. The history of frozen food dates back to as early as 1000 BC, when the Chinese stored food in ice cellars. So, did they really have frozen food? Not really, but they did store food in ice cellars, so maybe it got frozen in that way. Is that modern frozen food? Not necessarily, but still an interesting fact.
Absolutely. They noticed that if you put food and let it become very, very cold, and then later on try to eat it, it will still taste okay. It won't start to turn into yucky, rotten mush like normal food would. So as it says, it was first thought of and first sort of tried out many, many years ago in ancient China. However, frozen food didn't become popular until much later. You need a way to keep the temperature very low and have it stay there and not have the food change temperature. That's not as easy as you would think. So, the modern frozen food industry began with an American named Clarence Birdseye, and it wasn't many thousands of years BC.
An American man named Clarence Birdseye. Yes, so there you go. It started a long time ago, this whole frozen food thing. But real frozen food didn't become a thing, become popular until much more recently. It didn't become popular in 1000 BC. Anyways, though, Clarence Birdseye. Let's learn about this guy. During a trip to Canada, Birdseye went ice fishing with Inuit people and noticed that their fish froze immediately in the cold air. They would catch a fish, they would land it, they would probably put it on the ice next to them, and it would freeze immediately. It would flash freeze.
Interesting. So, impressed by how fresh the fish tasted, he brought the idea back to the U.S. So there you are. If you're fishing through the ice on a cold winter day, the fish you catch will freeze very quickly. Then you take it back to your igloo or hut or tent or whatever, warm it up, and it still tastes fresh. And this really impressed Clarence Birdseye. This is fish that was caught 3 days ago, and if I eat it now, it tastes like you just pulled it out of the river.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yes, if you're impressed, you might want to say, wow, that's cool. So in this particular situation, something happened, and Clarence Birdseye thought, that's great. I can use this idea. How impressive. I'm impressed. By the way, if you are impressed by someone, let's say, you might have a lot of respect or admiration for them because they're talented, they've got good personal qualities, so on and so forth. But here, we're talking about being impressed by something. Okay, this thing impresses you, you say, wow, you think it's pretty cool, pretty great. For example, Lana impressed her teachers with how well she could play the piano. Look at her, a little Mozart. Wow, we're so impressed. All right, everyone, with that, it's time for us to take a break, but don't go away. We'll be back soon.
冷冻食品的历史最早可以追溯到西元前1000年，当时中国人把食物储存在冰窖里面。那不过冷冻食品是到很晚之后才开始流行的。这边用到一个文法，重点是 not 什么什么 until 的用法。until 它是指直到什么为止，它可以当介系词，那后面就是配名词，也可以当连接词，那后面就是接子句。我们用 until 去搭配否定的主要子句时，就可以表达直到什么什么才怎么样，或者是除非怎么样怎么样。好，它的句型是主词加上 not 加动词加上 until， 后面可以接名词或子句。我们来造两个例句。Don't open the present until your birthday. 等到你生日的时候再开礼物哦。I won't tell you my secret until you tell me yours. 我不会把我的秘密告诉你，除非你先告诉我。好，那么课文就写到说，现代的冷冻食品业呢，是从一位名叫 Clarence Birdseye 的这位美国人开始的。他到加拿大旅行期间呢，有跟因纽特人在冰上钓鱼。他发现鱼在冷空气中会立刻就结冰，那可能他想说这个退冰之后来料理，然后这个鱼的味道还是很新鲜，这就让他留下深刻的印象。于是他就把这样的想法带回美国。我们先来看单字 impress。impress 这个动词是指使什么印象深刻，或是使钦佩。我们在字尾加上 ive 变成形容词 impressive， 就是令人印象深刻的，或是了不起的。那么补充单字 Inuit。Inuit 是指因纽特人，他们是北美原住民，居住在北极圈附近。那么 Mike 老师说的 igloo 是 igloo， 它是指冰屋，同学们应该都有看过它的图片照片，它就是那种拱形圆顶的小冰屋。好，另外老师刚刚还有提到说，我们的食物呢，经过冷冻，它才不会变成恶心、软烂糊糊的东西。好，老师用到 yucky，yucky， 就是形容恶心的。还有用到 mush，mush， 这个字呢，则是用来表达软糊状的食物。解法课文中。
The cold hard facts about frozen food. In 1930, Birdseye used his new quick freezing method to create a line of tasty frozen foods. It included basics such as meat, fish, fruits, and vegetables. Despite the improved taste, it took time for people to warm up to frozen food. The turning point came during World War II when a shortage of canned foods forced Americans to switch to frozen. Ever since then, frozen food has remained a kitchen staple.
Okay, we're still talking about Clarence Birdseye. He was impressed by what he saw there in Canada, so he brought that technique of freezing food back to the United States. In 1930, it says, Birdseye used his new quick freezing method to create a line of tasty frozen food. So in Canada, he saw how cold air in nature would freeze fish. He brought that idea back and he was able to quick freeze foods. Was he doing this with Canadian air? No, he was probably doing it with refrigerators or refrigeration techniques.
There you go. And so, of course, he tried a lot of different things to see what would really work. It said it included this line, this product range of things that he was selling people or trying to get people to buy. It included basics such as meat, fish, fruits, and vegetables. I'm sure he tried everything, probably discovered that carrots and peas and potatoes, they freeze well, whereas something like a tomato probably doesn't freeze so well. But you got to try these things out, and he discovered that a number of things, you can freeze them quickly and then reheat them later, and they will taste just fine. But there is some time involved here. So the taste could be good, but the time could still be a bit of a problem.
You can't eat frozen food.
No.
It's like ice. You're going to have to warm it up. So despite the improved taste, frozen foods, they tasted pretty good. Despite the improved taste, though, it did take time to warm up the food. It took time for people to warm up to frozen food, okay? So that's kind of a drawback.
The turning point, the big change, the turning point came during World War II when a shortage of canned foods forced Americans to switch to frozen or to frozen foods. World War II, American soldiers were all around the world fighting, and so of course a lot of these cans of food were being sent off to feed the soldiers. So for people at home in America, suddenly the store shelves didn't have the canned foods they were used to. They had to make a choice, but they could switch to frozen foods. To switch, this verb basically means to change from one thing to the other thing. You have two options. You've gone with A, but for some reason you're not happy or you can't choose A anymore, so you flip over to B. You switch from A to B. For example, my mom mentioned that she switched to a new brand of dish soap. There probably aren't a million types out there. There's probably two popular types. She used to buy product A, now she's flipped over to B. She's switched.
Anyways, during World War II, canned food was no longer an option, so people started using frozen food. It was probably a pain to warm it up, but at least you weren't going hungry because the canned food just wasn't there. It wasn't available. Anyways, ever since then, since World War II then, when people made the switch, ever since then, frozen food has remained a kitchen staple. Yes, if you look in my fridge, in my freezer, any time of the year, you will see a bag of frozen peas. 100%, because frozen peas are delicious and great and about as good as fresh peas.
It's true. And easier to find.
It's true. Okay, folks, with that, it's time for us to say goodbye for now, but don't worry, we'll be back with more next time.
好 ，Clarence Birdseye 在1930年用他新的急速冷冻方法去创造出一系列美味的冷冻食品，包含有基本食品像是肉啊、鱼、水果、蔬菜等等。那么课文写到说，尽管味道有所改善，但人们还是花了一段时间才对冷冻食品感兴趣。那这边有3个重点，第一个。介系词 despite 它表示尽管虽然，那么后面要接名词或动名词，例如 They went for a walk despite the rain， 尽管下雨，他们还是去散步。第二个重点 It takes time 加上不定词，或者是 It takes time for somebody 加上不定词，可以表达某人花了多少时间做某事，或者是做某事需要时间。那这边句型里面的 it 是虚主词，用来代替不定词。例如 It takes time to get over a breakup 要从分手中恢复是需要时间的。第三个重点warm up to 加上某人或某事物，或者是 warm to 加上某人或某事物，就可以表达对什么什么变得感兴趣，对什么什么开始有好感。例如 I'm warming up to the idea 就可以表达我开始对这个想法感兴趣了。好，那么人们对冷冻食品一直都没有太大的兴趣，直到2次世界大战期间，罐头食品短缺，这就迫使美国人开始使用冷冻食品。那从此之后，冷冻食品就变成了厨房里面的必需品啦。好，单字 switch 它是当动词来表达转换、改变或是调换。Mike 老师在解释单字时有用到 flip 这个字 ，F-L-I-P， flip 它表示翻转、转动或是迅速的翻动。最后补充一下，老师们有聊到冷冻食品比较麻烦的就是它必须花时间再重新加热，这是它的缺点。那老师们用到 drawback。drawback drawback 就表示缺点、短处或是不利条件，还有用到 reheat 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 表示使什么重新加热。好，那么以上是这些讲解，同学别走开，马上回来哦。
Hello， 各位同学，大家好，我是建安老师。我们今天带大家看简短对话，来提醒一样是这个细节题哦，人物的地点啊等等，来询问细节哦。我们注意看一下，在细节其实呢，它不一定会出现在题目的某一个地方哦，它不一定有固定的地方哦，但是呢，就是要先知道他要问什么，那再去听的时候就比较容易抓到答案咯。第一个 ，What product did the man purchase？ 所以他买什么产品啊 ？What product？OK？From the woman's company, insurance coverage 它是买保险吗 ？Technical manual 技术手册，home security system 家庭的安全系统 ，computer program 还是这个这个软体电脑的软体。第二题 ，What does the man think of the after sale service？ 他觉得售后服务如何 ？A upside down 是颠倒过来的。B extraordinary 它是很杰出的。C far from satisfactory， 完完全全的不令人满意就不 OK， 好，差这个 satisfactory 离满意这件事情差得远了。最后一个 problematic 有蛮大的问题，好，我们来听听看。
Usually, security software is covered by warranty for 90 days, but because you purchased our technical services contract, your coverage was extended for another 60 days.
That's great. So that means I still have 50 more days of coverage. I hope I won't need to contact you again, though. I'd rather my software not have any more problems.
We feel the same way, but if anything does happen, our software engineers will be available to help you, just as they were before.
Thanks. Your customer support is really top-notch.
Alright, your customer support is really top-notch. Okay, top-notch. Okay, 这是很顶尖的意思很棒的，倍儿棒。1等1的棒，所以呢，第二个 ，What does the man think of the after sale service？ 是哪一个？是 extraordinary，alright， 是很杰出的，很棒的。那第一个呢 ，What product did the man purchase from the woman's company？ 他买的是什么？大家有没有听出来
？Usually, security software is covered by warranty for 90 days.
一开始的女生她就说 ，Usually security software 就是呢安全性的软体 ，OK， 这边就已经讲出来了。
But because you purchased our technical services contract, your coverage was extended for another 60 days.
That's great. So that means I still have 50 more days of coverage.
Coverage 是什么呢 ？Coverage 就是保险，保险完之后呢，或者是保固，它就是涵盖的这段期间
I hope I won't need to contact you again, though. I'd rather my software not have any more problems.
I'd rather my software， 我宁愿我的软体。OK， 所以一开始讲到的这个security software， 然后后面这边又讲说 I'd rather my software not have any more problems。OK， 其实我宁愿我的这个软体没有任何的问题。然后这边我们讲一下一个文法的问题I'd rather 这个是宁愿怎么样？那后面如果加句子，你看I'd rather 这件事情啊，宁愿它不要怎么样。My software 是不是单数 ？OK， 但是后面这边是 not have 用原形啊，所以 I'd rather something 后面一定要加上动词原形，因为它前面其实有点像是少掉 should 一样。OK，any more problems 啊，不要有任何更多的问题了。OK， 好，所以呢。这边 our software engineer， 所以从头到尾其实有蛮多这些细节的，所以他买什么产品啦？software 就是 DL a computer program，all right， 这样应该就清楚了。以上是我们今天的课程内容，我们下堂课见，拜拜。
See you next time.